We've got our two final panelists who will be presenting the future of the sea and its significance to California. Dan Denham, Colorado River Program Director with the San Diego County Water Authority, and Kaylee Wright, Deputy Secretary of State of Natural Resources Agency. Thank you, gentlemen, and the floor is yours. Yeah, Mr. Denham.
Sure. Good afternoon, and thank you. I think a lot of good things have been said today. I would certainly agree with points raised by the last panel about phasing projects and realistic projects that can be done in the short term. The Water Authority, I don't think it's a stretch to say that we have been one of the most vocal proponents of doing something at the sea outside of those people, the residents and the irrigation districts that live out there in the valley, in the Coachella and Imperial Valleys. We certainly have been the largest contributor to date of funding to mitigation and restoration. One thing I do want to do, though, is sort of update the conversation a bit about the QSA and the QSA transfers before I talk to you about the list that we provided to the Salton Sea Authority. And I think the QSA transfers, and by that I mean the Water Authority Imperial transfer and the Coachella IID transfer. It's obviously focused because the mitigation water will end, as everyone has described, in 18 months or so. There's no doubt about that, and there's no doubt about the impacts that everyone knows that will happen from that. But I think something to consider as we as the public discourse on all of this continues is we are where we are today because of a state of California water policy, and that's based on the California Constitution and reasonable and beneficial use. If California didn't have a policy to not waste water and put it to the most reasonable and beneficial use, the sea would be where it was at in the 80s, the 70s and 80s. It would be flooding, and we wouldn't be here today. It's the improvements that the irrigation districts in the Imperial Valley and Coachella Valley have made that have got us to where we are today in terms of the sea shrinking, because we're all being asked to conserve water, and that point is more important today than it ever has been. So I just think consider our State Water Resource Control Board policy and our own California Constitution on that as we move forward with these discussions. That being said, I do think that the question was asked earlier about who is financially responsible. Without a doubt, the Water Authority believes that the state does have that responsibility. Some people described that the QSA was backstopped by the state, and I would agree with that. All of that being said, I think that there's a lot of opportunity out there, and as Ms. Delfino said, I don't believe that it is very complicated to implement some of the projects. And you have a list before you that we've put together for the task force, and it's no different than what a number of people have already described. They are no regrets type of projects. There's some identified funding going forward that we've identified there. And I guess what I would urge more than anything else, and again, this is a theme that has sort of been discussed here today, is that everyone involved in this process needs to be realistic about expectations. And I think Mr. Bright will talk about the species conservation habitat a bit. That is one of the most, if not the most important projects that we should all get behind and support at this point in time. It provides the most immediate mechanism in support of the Pacific Flyway, in support of fish-eating birds, and the Water Authority would support Prop 1 money, and we have been a big advocate to get Prop 1 Salton Sea restoration money through the San Diego delegation in the water bond to get that done, and we would support that. All that being said, the future of the Salton Sea cannot look like just the species conservation habitat. It cannot be all marshes and tules. And I think that going forward, as we all have a vision for what this sea might be, we've talked about public health quite a bit. It may be that there are large areas of barren land that are suppressed by surfactant, and that's going to protect air quality, public health, asthma, things that we've all heard today. Because if we start designing things in the manner that we've described in the past, I think that we're destined for failure. So I would leave it at that, and if you have questions about the list or any ways that the Water Authority is working toward meeting our mitigation obligations, I'd be happy to answer those questions.
Thank you. No, thank you. So I have the pleasure of batting cleanup on this hearing, and I really just wanted to say that to open up that even though we have testified on this issue numerous times in different committees, the time is right to keep having these hearings, because we really are in a state of we're at a transition point with the Salton Sea. I easily could just, I would agree with most of the comments made today. But I really, one point I really want to underscore with the Salton Sea is that, while, there are a lot of shared interests, and, there are a lot of shared interests in addressing the air quality issues for the locals, addressing the natural resources threats that the Salton Sea presents. There is also a very real shared interest around water security that the Salton Sea provides, and it's absolutely essential for the water supply of the state that we get the Salton Sea right. And the governor, in his water action plan, recognized the Salton Sea as a key component of the state's water strategy, and including the water action, including the Salton Sea in that plan, was the first step of building an agenda around finding solutions that are sustainable and realistic for the Salton Sea. The next step, which was very important, was to have the realization that the $9 billion plan was no longer feasible. We had been talking about whether or not $9 billion was the right number, whether or not the components were accurate, but I think it really took an affirmative step to say that the $9 billion was not a feasible target, and it was actually standing in the way of real progress at the sea. So moving beyond that number has opened the door for a lot of the cooperation and agreement that you're hearing today in this hearing. The next step is, the development of the Salton Sea Task Force, which it was called. The task force, probably better could have been named, a strike team of the governor's key advisors. And the purpose of the task force was to assemble the key members of the administration in the agencies that are and will be dealing with the Salton Sea over time. The Salton Sea is an issue that spans multiple agencies. It's not just natural resources. The air quality impacts and the local impacts draw in other Cal EPA and local government corners of the administration. And the Salton Sea Task Force was really tasked to perform some simple duties. Number one, develop recommendations for short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. We've talked a lot today about the short-term goals and the medium-term goals, so I won't go into there. But the second piece is really how do we achieve those goals, and governance is a huge component of that. Governance means who's in the room, but it also means who is taking leadership on the issue. Going back to the water security, comment I made, this is a water security issue for the state. Colorado is a major supply of water for California, and when we're looking at the Salton Sea, we need to, when we're looking at the stakeholders that should be kind of bound together in dealing with this issue, my feeling is we need to look at all of those who depend on the Colorado River, because I think it was Kim who said the words destabilized region. I think a Salton Sea that's unaddressed really does threaten to destabilize a water region, which is kind of like its own geopolitical region, and that's not good for any regions that's trying to tackle the problems that the drought is presenting to us. Right now, we're seeing a lot of progress at the project level with the first phase of projects that the legislature has funded. We're seeing a lot of progress at the local level in their cooperation and their own investment into planning and development of projects. The federal government has actively stepped up and offered to provide their assistance in every way, short of appropriations in their bills right now. But I think the onus is really on us to develop concrete short-term and medium-term plans that we can then use to rally around to try to find funding and implement. So I guess I will leave it with there are no magic wands at the Salton Sea, but we have a lot of opportunities and we have the right partners stepping up at this moment. And I think we're at a very important time, and I'm optimistic.
Thank you. Can you perhaps give us a sense of some timelines that this working group that the governor has put together has perhaps set forward? And I think it's important not only for local individuals who are here, but those who are paying close attention to the work that's been done. Can you kind of shed some light on what those deadlines or expectations are looking like from the part of the governor's working group?
So as a status update, we have more or less completed our meetings, but we're open to having more meetings, and some have requested additional meetings. But I would say the bulk of the meetings have been concluded. The task force, or our working group right now, will then take our recommendations to the governor. We're waiting to see the initiative be released to see how we use or incorporate the work that's being done at the local level into those short-term recommendations we ultimately make to the governor. Mm-hmm. I can't say that there's a specific timeline, but I would say we're trying to work underneath the schedule that we get. We don't have time to sit on this beyond the fall and winter, so we have to pull recommendations together, in that timeline.
Can you elaborate on the Colorado River?
Yeah.
And one thing is having regions in Southern California with some of the largest allocations of water coming from the Colorado River, but if the water isn't there isn't anything to allocate. Can you kind of touch on that and the implications it has overall, not only to the sea but to the region as a whole?
So and I'm no expert on the Colorado, but the Colorado has a very established water rights system in place. That system provides for different uses, different transfers, different ways that the member agencies can work within in those allotments. I guess my point was, if the Salton Sea is a stabilizing factor along the Colorado, even amongst the other states, because it puts the state's usage kind of in under a limit, for lack of a better word, and it provides kind of clear. It provides a stable framework for all of the different agencies to work within. If the Colorado if the Salton Sea were to be, if there were an action on the Salton Sea, it would, I don't know, you could probably comment to that better than I can. But
I can add to it a bit. I think you go back to some of the points that I was talking about earlier in terms of the 70s and 80s and California's Colorado River water use. At that time, in 1984, I believe it was, the State Board decision 1600 regarding reasonable and beneficial use of irrigation water found that there was roughly 1 million acre-feet of water, Colorado River water, that they termed as being stranded in the Salton Sea. So if you take that in perspective with California as a whole overusing its river water at the same time, you had an administration and our legislators at the time take action to say we need to sort of tighten things up as a collective state and as Colorado River water users. And so all of the actions going forward from the 80s got us to a point of stabilization on the river, where we could look our partners in the face in the other 7 basin states and say that we are living up to our allotment of water. We're not overusing. Mm-hmm. And then the QSA was the mechanism to ensure that we kept doing what we said we were going to do.
Mm-hmm. And I would only add that, you know, this all comes down to how do we manage our fresh water that we have and runoff, you know, after the QSA is fully implemented. If we over time don't take any steps to manage that fresh water in a way that's productive to provide the benefits of air quality, habitat, and you know, and the like, it'll be hard to make the case that that's a good use of that limited resource. And I'm sure the pressures will come from other sides of the Colorado River to pull that back, and we're back into a situation down there where there's of conflict.
A question regarding the permitting process that we've heard quite a bit. Anything that you can shed light on from that standpoint in terms of what the agencies are doing or are considering to do in order to not cut corners, but to be more expeditious in making sure that we can move forward with these projects?
So I think Kim characterized it very well. It's not one big permit that's stopping these projects. Sure. It's death by 1,000 processes, and we're all guilty. Everyone working on these projects are guilty of delaying them. Getting people together to coordinate those permits is key. Governance and how we set that up will be instrumental in achieving that.
Okay. Is that going to require an act of God or a piece of legislation, or in your opinion?
I think that's for the governor to decide how we establish a governance structure, but it very well could.
Okay. Any questions, Mr. Mays?
No.
All right. Closing comments?
No.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for being here and participating on the panel. Very valuable information you've shared with us. I'd like to go to the public comment section of the agenda, and sticking to the 2-hour time period here, I'll ask if those who want to speak, perhaps even those who already spoke on the panel, would like to just close with a few remarks during public comments. Just please state your name and agency you're with for the record. So at this time, we'll open it up for public comments. Okay, seeing that we have no public comments, Mr. Mays, would you like to make a few statements in closing?
Sure. Just wanted to thank all of those who participated in this discussion today. It actually was very helpful for me. I learned a few things today. So thank you for taking time or flying up here to be with us. I know there's been a lot of conversation, a lot of discussion about the Salton Sea, and there's been lots of plans, as was stated today. But it really does seem it seems like we're getting to a point of realizing there is an end, and we've got to be able to solve it, and we're doing things in a realistic way. And it looks like folks are working together, and that's exciting to see. I do want to make mention, though, of the work that Assemblymember Garcia has done. He's been here for 7 months as well, and the impacts of the Salton Sea are great on his district, and he wasted no time when he got here to make sure that as a member of this governing board that our eyes and ears and our hands were going to begin working on this. And so he's to be commended for his work in putting together this select committee and making sure that the state holds to their side of the agreement as well. So he's to be commended. Thank you again.
Thank you, Assembly Member. And just wanted to highlight, we've got the Governor's Task Force of working group of key stakeholders at the state level convening on the Salton Sea restoration efforts. We have the conservation habitat projects that are at a point where they will begin construction sooner rather than later. IID, Imperial Irrigation District, and Imperial County, along with the Salton Sea Authority that's made up of the Torres Martinez Tribe, Riverside County, Coachella Valley Water District, are close to unveiling some of the updated ideas and plans with the Salton Sea Action Plan. So we've got a lot of momentum, in my opinion, moving forward. And so I just wanted to close with that note and say thank you to everyone. I feel very optimistic that, at the end of this year, we will have some short-term goals that will be presented by, the governor's office, working closely with our local stakeholders. And, of course, the commitment that we've put forward as legislators representing the region and ultimately the people who have been impacted and will be impacted by no action. So thank you again for those of you who have traveled from afar, those of you who are here and continue to work with us on the issue. Again, thank you, and this select committee hearing is adjourned.